So, today we're going to be discussing the famous dark satire graphic novel, The Watchmen by Alan Moore. And before we really get into the video, here's a little primer of what the main joke behind pretty much every dark satire graphic novel is.
You're horrible! You're an irredeemable monster!
Oh, what took you so long, idiot?
Hello and welcome to another installment of Stereotype or Representation, where I go through Apologia's top 10 atheist comic book characters list and honorable mentions that I am reasonably familiar with, and I rate as to whether they're a stereotype or a good atheist representation. Now, as always, media critique is very subjective, and deciding on what is harmful stereotype and what is good representation is doubly so. So this is very much just my opinion on the matter. And with that, we'll start with the lower of the two characters on the list, Walter Kovacs or Rorschach. So feel free to give us a little bit of a primer, Paul.
Number 7 is from Alan Moore's masterpiece, The Watchmen. The troubled, ruthless, alarmingly quotable vigilante, Walter Kovacs, aka Rorschach. He's unique on this list in that he is a black and white thinking, moral absolutist, anti-liberal nationalist. Traits more closely associated with Christians than atheists, at least in America. Maybe that's why the movie didn't go as far on his God denial.
See, Dr. God didn't kill that little girl. Fate didn't butcher her. Destiny didn't feed her to those dogs. God saw what any of us did that night. He didn't seem to mind. From then on, I knew. God doesn't make the world this way. We do.
One could argue that movie Rorschach was some kind of deist, but the same scene in the comic is more clear. There is nothing else. Existence is random, has no pattern save what we imagine after staring at it too long. No meaning save what we choose to impose. This rudderless world is not shaped by vague metaphysical forces. It is not God who kills the children, not fate that butchers them, or destiny that feeds them to dogs. It's us. Only us.
So, the main takeaway moral of The Watchmen in a nutshell is ACAB includes superheroes, and Walter Kovacs is very much the emblematic character of this point. He is a hyper-violent, misogynist prick, and very much mentally unhinged. He sees the world, as a random series of, coincidences and happenstances. His name, his nom de guerre, his mask, or rather his face, because he refers, to the Rorschach persona as his true identity. He refers to the mask as his face. He's fully into the costume vigilante role. And so his face, his chosen persona, mimics the the cruel randomness that he sees in the world, and he's made it his mission to brutally impose order on that chaos against that chaos on a personal level. Honestly, like, at a first glance, he seems, very atypical of what you'd expect of an atheistic character. However, when you take his personal worldview and how nihilistic his viewpoint is, it does lean more towards some theistic talking points in regards to, the atheistic mindset. So, with that, we're going to move on to John Osterman, or Dr. Manhattan. And once again, I'll refer to Paul Gia's video for the primer.
For number 3, we hit up Watchmen, one of the greatest series of all time, for a second entry on the list with Dr. Manhattan, whose powers make him as close to a capital G god as might be possible on a purely naturalistic framework. He's invulnerable, can telekinetically manipulate any matter at subatomic levels to the point of forming worlds, creating life, or transforming his own form. He has vast knowledge and can manipulate time, experiencing every instant simultaneously.
And would you say, as so many claim, that you are in fact a god, given that you see the past and future simultaneously?
I can only see my own past, my own future. I am not omniscient.
Still, Dr. Manhattan is an atheist.
She says I am like a god now. I tell her I don't think there is a god. And if there is, I'm nothing like him.
Now, while Walter Kovacs, aka Rorschach, is a big bundle of issues masquerading as a somewhat functional human being, John Osterman is very much a cold, logical person, and in fact, Dr. Manhattan's entire arc in Watchmen is very much how his near, omnipotent power has very much cut him off from humanity, and how his, and how he grows ever more distant and more dispassionate from, the people that, love him, the people that he loves and loves, love him, and humanity as a large, humanity as a whole. But the whole point of John Osterman's character is that his powers, the accident that he went through, the immense power that he wields, the immense knowledge that he wields, that he gains through those powers, being able to perceive his entire timeline at once, and, being able to manipulate matter on a subatomic level, and, transpose himself over his timeline. Like, it's the archetype of, Superman's struggle to maintain connection with humanity moved to the upteenth degree. Now, there's a reason why I haven't given my verdict after each little snippet, and how how each character fits into the themology of Watchmen as a whole, is because you have to remember, and most people forget this, Watchmen is a satire. It is, yes, Alan Moore's 1986 graphic novel, The Watchmen, is a tour de force of comics. It is a, landmark work. But people forget why it's a landmark work. See, people like to put Watchmen up on its pedestal because, it was among the first comics to really introduce a dark, gritty realism and, really add some, it was the first comic for, first graphic novel for adults. It was really violent, and there were a lot of sex, and, it had stuff for adults in there. And, it was a departure from the Silver Age. And yes, it was a departure from the Silver Age, but that's because it was a satire of the Silver Age. Watchmen is important because it's one of the first works to critique the genre of comic books, literarily speaking, from within the genre of comic books. And it does this by satirizing the Silver Age, which was, overseen by the comic book, the Comics Code Authority. So, why am I talking about Watchmen's place in comics while discussing, Rorschach and Dr. Manhattan, and whether I view them as, representative or stereotypes? Well, see, what you have to realize is that all the Watchmen heroes are parodies of, well, not DC heroes, but top comics heroes. Alan Moore actually wanted to do a series on the Topps comic heroes when DC bought the rights to them, but DC wanted to integrate them into the mainstream, their mainstream universe. So instead he did parody versions of them, like Rorschach is a parody of The Question, Night Owl is a parody of the Blue Beetle, Dr. Manhattan corresponds to Captain Atom, etc., etc. And so so we're talking about characters that are parodies of other comic book characters in a work that is satirizing the, an era of comics where everything was squeaky clean and upheld the status quo, and superheroes might as well have been deputized by law enforcement because the villain always ended up in jail, and the heroes and protagonists always respected authority. And Alan Moore basically turned that up to 11 and gave us the fascist dystopia of the Watchmen. And when you take it straight, like a certain director did, you end up accidentally glorifying fascism, which we're definitely going to talk about in this coming week when we discuss 300. So you have, a hyper moralistic nihilist imposing his own subjective morality onto a world that he views as broken and disordered and random, and a near omnipotent being who is very much completely becoming detached from his empathy and humanity, merely seeing the functions of the universe as simple logic and math and science problems. And this is all in a work that is a satire. So I'm going to say it. Both Dr. Manhattan and Rorschach are stereotypes, because what else could they be? you know, I mean, feel free to disagree with me in the comments below, but literally speaking, they are archetypes of archetypes, and part of the dark comic genre, satire genre, part of the joke is to show that the heroes that you're primed to root for unquestioningly from decades of reading under a strictly controlled and censored genre, that you're rooting for people who are just as bad or maybe even worse than the antagonists that they're facing. They're parodies of characters stretched out into being an archetype of an archetype. So yeah, I'm gonna say it, they're stereotypes. And with that, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below if you disagree with me. There's still quite a few in Apologia's video, which is linked in the description below, that I have to get to before I can get into my 3-part remake of my response to him. Though, I mean, this is really becoming a response series to Apologia's video. But like, subscribe, ring the bell, do all the YouTube stuff, and if you get me to 250 by March 31st, I'm going to live stream karaoke American Pie blindfolded. And with all that, remember, indoctrination is a hell of a drug. There's no reason to get excited. The thief he kindly spoke. There are many here among us who feel that life is but a joke. And you and I, we've been through that, but this is not our fate. So let us not talk falsely now, the hour is getting late.